cried the sparrow.
You're listening to the Sailing into Oblivion podcast, where we sit down with everyday people who do extraordinary things. I'm your host, Jerome Rand.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the show. Cape Cod edition. Big shout out to my very good friend Lucy for allowing Sparrow and I to barnacle on to her beautiful, adorable little boathouse, which has a dock just about big enough for the regular part of Sparrow. Her bowsprit sticks out a little far, I'm not going to lie, but I dressed her up with all the flags and made her look pretty good so that she fits in around these parts. This is definitely a beautiful, beautiful part of not only the United States, but Cape Cod in general. It's absolutely stunning, and all the people that we've met so far have been absolutely wonderful. So big shout out. Looking forward to spending some more time here and meeting some more great people, and possibly convincing a few of them to come on the show and share some of their stories, from wood building to historic names you might heard of. I don't want to spoil anything, but we'll see who we can get our clutches on while we're here. But yeah, it's beautiful. Was able to finally pull in. Oh my gosh, that was a long night. Oh geez, I'm not at spring chicken anymore, I'll tell you. That was not easy. I'm just glad there weren't any issues. Let's just say that. You know, it's one of those things where, you know, when we're young and we can stay up all night and it's really not all that big a deal, and you can go about doing things, and if things go wrong and you've been up for 20 hours or whatever, you can focus and you can handle them. Well, the case is not the same anymore. And essentially, you know, if you listen to the last podcast, that little update, essentially, I had gone and made it all the way to the wind farms, which lie just a few miles south of these channels that get you into Nantucket Sound. But it was still going to be another 50, 60 miles total to get to this dock and to the safety of being tied off so that I could, well, in one word, collapse. I was, you know, whenever you're coming off of one of these voyages, week long or more, you're pretty tired by the end of it. I typically take about a week to get into a rhythm where I'm starting to feel fully rested when I go out to sea, so that I can stay out there for, you know, months, if you will. Well, and caveat there, because you're never fully rested out at sea. There's sometimes where you can sleep as much as you want because the weather is fine, but then Mother Nature has a tendency to pull back on the reins, if you will, and make sure that you know who's in charge. And just because you might want to sleep and you haven't slept in, say, 20 hours, sometimes the weather is not going to let you do that. But I don't know. That's all neither here nor there. I get to the wind farms, and funny thing about that, so I'm sailing along, no engine. Obviously, the prop was still freewheeling, but that's never a vibration. That's just a sound, because it's smooth. It's a velvet drive transmission, so it's from what I'm told, that's just what they do. And I'm feeling this vibration. I'm feeling it right through my feet, on the boat, everything, and I'm like, what is that? And I kind of go around. I'm opening up the engine room, sticking my head in. I can see the prop, and the prop shaft is moving and stuff, and that's fine. But there's no vibration coming out of there. I'm checking stays. I'm checking halyard. Sometimes I tighten the halyard too much, or it just hits the perfect resonance frequency, and it starts to just vibrate, and it gets worse and worse, and to the point where it's audible. And I'm not finding anything. I'm looking at the fans. I'm looking for anything, because it's really smooth sailing. I can hear everything. There's barely any water noise. We're doing like 4 or 5 knots. And then finally I realize, so there's just off to starboard with the wind farms that's just south of Nantucket. And then we're talking like 50, 60 of these things. They're everywhere. They're also building them. And there's like 5 or 6 different big ships. And there's one, they were towing out a new mooring base or something like that. So there were a couple of tugboats doing that. They were working hard. On the other side, on the Martha's Vineyard side, they're building another. So they got these huge cranes. Long story short, there's like a gigantic amount of huge, heavy ships and gigantic engines ripping and running. And it was causing the entire ocean to vibrate. That's what it was. Because once I put a little distance between me and them, then all of a sudden the vibrations and everything went away. And I had felt that before out on the ocean blue, most pronouncedly in the doldrums. There was a time that I was passed very, very closely by like an 800-foot oil tanker that was headed back to, I think, Africa to fill up. And the vibrations of that definitely shook Mighty Sparrow, something fierce. And, those are big engines and everything. And it's just the fact that there were so many of these ships and they were all working and moving at the same time. But it just puzzled me. I just could feel it coming up through my feet. I could feel it when I put my hand on the hull. And boy, I was like, holy cow, what is going on? What's about to shake apart? Any vibrations kind of scare me a little bit. On Old Sparrow, because I don't know. I think vibration, and I think it loosening things, and all of a sudden bits and pieces coming apart. So I'm always I hit like a heightened awareness whenever something starts vibrating around this boat. I'm like, all right, well, we're gonna find this and stop it. So kind of funny, but the sun finally sets and we're still sailing. I can't believe it. And it's actually looking like if the wind holds, I would have been able to sail on a beam reach and a broad reach all the way through Nantucket Sound, all the way up to where I am now. And lo and behold, as soon as that sunset, the moon's out, it's still beautiful, but that wind just cut off like a light switch. Done. And I'm kind of sitting there and I'm looking around and I can see some little wind lines around, and I'm thinking, oh, maybe we're just in a little lull. We found a little hole. We're going to come out of this. It didn't happen. And I was just finishing, or in the middle of making this macaroni and cheese that was going to be my dinner for the duration, that I could nip down, take a spoonful, eat it, be happy, and then sit up on deck for another 30 minutes or whatever. And I'm just like, oh no, here we go. The final push, though. And so that kind of got me prodded into action. And, the normal operation, the sequence of events that has to happen to go from sailing to motoring under normal circumstances, which this was pretty darn close except for the pipe wrench, is, come down, open up the exhaust valve for the through hull going through, for the exhaust, then open up the fuel tank cutoff, and then go ahead and fire up the engine, plug in the tiller pilot so that I don't have to sit on the helm the whole time, undo the wind blade and then the rudder on the Aries wind vane for Mongo, and then fire up the engine, get moving forward, and then take down all the sails. Now, I left the main up because there was still a bit of swell, and that was needed for just a bit of, the old stabilization out there. But the drifter had to come down, and slowly but surely, once we got in, then the mainsail came down. And, right as soon as the mainsail comes down, the wind kind of picks up a little. But it wasn't ever, big enough to actually get us moving forward really more than like 2 knots. So once the mainsail came down, it was going to stay down. And I was just into it. I was like, all right, let's motor. The only problem was I'm hitting this channel essentially as the ebb tide is going out. And so for the first, I think like 5-6 miles, we might have been doing between 1.8 and 2.8 miles or nautical miles an hour. So it was a slow progression to get into Nantucket Sound. But I was hitting it just close to the change, because by the time I got into the actual sound proper, now all of a sudden we were at slack, and then the tide was actually going with me for the remainder, which was kind of nice. But The engine was chugging away. I did have my doubts, having just sort of fixed it that morning. And I think also when we get tired, we start to get a little anxious. We start to get a little paranoid, if you will. Bad thoughts start coming into our heads because we're just tired, we're exhausted, and we're like, oh man, the what ifs. What if I run over a lobster pot and get the line tied around the prop, and all of a sudden, there's no wind, and now I don't have an engine, and I'm just drifting, and there's shoals everywhere. Oh my gosh! And all of a sudden, it's this chaotic brew of anxiety. So I'm coming up with game plans. I've got my anchor; it's ready to go. Most of the sound in the area that I was in was going to be pretty shallow, so I could anchor pretty quickly. I thought about, I have my super sharp fillet knife so that I can go cut it free. I really don't want to go in the water. And then I started thinking, I was like, man, I don't know if I'd be able to climb back on Sparrow again because I know how hard that is sometimes. Like all these things are kind of going through my head. But lo and behold, we keep motoring through, and the engine sounds really good. It's not sputtering, nothing. So it does seem like I was just getting air bubbles in through the fuel lines or the connection points in between the tank, the primary fuel filter, and the lift pump. So I don't know. I'm still going to replace all of them just to be safe and make sure everything is up to snuff and replace the filters and stuff. But that's all coming soon enough. So I'm kind of motoring through, and then you go through, and you're able to cut through quite a few of these shoals and things like that thanks to Navionics and all that, which is really great. It is still a little risky. I mean, I must say, I don't think I'll ever be able to take that seamanship knowledge out of my head from back in the day when you were just using paper charts and not even GPS to kind of get your way around. You would, unless you knew those shoals and those areas very intimately, you would never leave the channel. And because it's one of those things, you think about it, you're like, oh, dude, we'll just take this quick little shortcut in between these shoals, and we're just gonna follow this little screen that's telling me that. And then suddenly something happens, and the screen's no longer there. Then what do? Well, essentially you got to either anchor, or you just hope you're doing it right. I mean, ideally, you'd have a very good chart. You're constantly keeping your position in little 6-minute EPs and stuff, and your compass course. I mean, that was just kind of that was just how it was done. And as easy and as nice and reliable as a lot of the modern tech is, boy, when it leaves you hanging, it sure can leave you in a spot where you're in a sticky situation, let's say that. But cut through these shoals, long story short, and then, I'm just motoring, and the hours and minutes are just ticking by. I started listening to Sebastian Junger's The Perfect Storm, and basically that carried me through the night. Thankfully, my assumption that Nantucket Sound was going to be very, very quiet as far as traffic was spot on. I think I only saw like 3 boats the whole time I was traversing this beautiful body of water, but it got, I think it was right around 3 a.m. The 3 to 4 a.m. area was probably the roughest as far as my exhaustion level. I just did not allow myself to get comfortable anywhere. So the minute I started sitting like in the beanbag chair and was like, oh, this is kind of nice, I was like, get up, let's do this move. Let's go stand on the bow. And so I started doing busy work and, prepping the boat for the dock and whatnot. And it was kind of nice because it was so calm and there wasn't much traffic. I was able to go ahead and just flip on the old spreader lights and illuminate the whole boat and pack down like the staysail and pack down the drifter and put all this stuff in its bags and pull all the fenders out and do all these things that normally you kind of do in a bit of a rushed fashion as you get into port or right before you enter whatever channel you're headed into and all that sort of stuff. So by the time I did finally get here, which was just after sunrise, which was also a relief and something that I was planning on, had I started, had my ETA put me at like 4 a.m., I just would have slowed down. Because as much as I wanted to get in here, I'd never actually pulled into this port, and I knew it was going to be a bit sketchy as far as the depth goes in some of these little areas, skirting over to this dock, and to try and tackle that at night is not something that I was really willing. It's just not worth the risk for me. That's all. And so I would have slowed down a little bit so that, boom, I hit the channel entrance right at sunrise. And, yeah, once the half light started coming up, oh, that was such a relief. It always fills you with a little bit of energy and confidence, and, you've sort of just made it through the night. Oh, coffee. I love you. And, yeah, essentially come in nice, super slow. Again, I'm a little worried about the depth, but it's not too big a deal. I kind of skirted around this mooring field because it's so jam-packed. It would have been... what's the best way to describe it? Okay, so when people are doing like downhill slalom skiing, one of the techniques for that is that you sort of start your turn before you get to the next gate that you have to go around, so that you're hitting that gate at like the apex of your turn. And it takes a lot of forethought and spatial awareness to do that. Same with like race car driving and all that sort of stuff, where you're not just following the road. You actually have to think about it beforehand and be like, oh, I want to actually go this way and start my turn harder so that the boat, you know what I mean, just to be able to wiggle through this thing. So I was like, nah, I'm not having any of that. Sparrow's just she can turn when she needs to, but she also doesn't forgive a lax helmsperson. Let's just say that. If you're not paying attention, dude, you're wielding 11 tons of boat around, and when she hits something, I can only imagine what it would do to the other vessel. So I'm erring on the side of caution, and yeah, we pull in and we're just kind of ghosting through this place. Luckily, it's a dead flat calm in here. There's no wind at all. So it's going to be an easy docking. And I was trying to picture this little dock, and it's little. I mean, Sparrow doesn't quite fit on it by any means. The bowspurit's sticking 10 feet off the end, but I was trying to picture it, and I had this image in my head, and it's so funny how sometimes you are so certain of your memory and you're thinking to yourself, oh yeah, I remember what that looks like. I remember exactly. Like, this is exactly what it was. And I thought, okay, this is an L dock. It comes out and then it goes up, and I'm going to get the face of it. So I am just going to plow straight in. I'm going to tie off port side 2. I'm just going to go down and collapse. This is going to be great. So I had my fenders out. I had my dock line set. I did all this well before knowing, okay, this is what I'm going to be seeing when I get there. Well, when I got here, it seems that old Jerome's memory is not quite as sharp as it once was. And the dock is not a T, it's or an L. It's basically just a pier that comes out. And there's a power boat on one side, and then there's about 25 feet of dock, and then a little pea-pod rowboat tied off at the shallow side. And I'm like, oh, okay. And there's more boats, 20, 30 feet off of this dock. So it's tight. Everything is tight. There's not a lot of room for maneuverability, but I'm coming in and I'm like, oh no. Okay. So I got to reverse into this slip. Here we go. And, cause if to keep all the fenders and lines and everything like that, either it was stop the boat and try and transverse all these lines over to the other side, or just go ahead and try and do a little 180 action and reverse the boat in. And that's the one that I ended up going with. But it was one where, as I start this hard turn and reverse, I'm looking at my bowsprit just a few feet off of this lovely power boat that's moored out there. And then I'm reversing away from that as my stern is coming in towards the shallows and towards this dock. And then I'm kind of doing this like 3-4 point pivot turn to slowly get in. And I'm trying desperately not to rev my engine or anything like that. A lot of prying eyes, So I finally do get in and I tie off, and I am so not only land sick, which I always get, where I'm kind of wobbling around all over the place, but I'm also exhausted, and I'm like, my eyes are barely open. I'm so happy to be tied off and no longer moving. And at the same time, though, I'm very unsteady on my feet, and it's a bit of a leap down. I get onto the dock, and everything's tied off, and I had the option to plug in and do all this stuff, and I didn't want. I just needed to get some sleep. But first, obviously, I had to go walk around a little bit, and just walking around and seeing this little place, which I've stayed at before, which is just this wonderful, wonderful, adorable little 100-something-year-old boathouse with a workshop on the basement or on the first floor, and then like an apartment on the second floor, and super nautical. There's barely any electrical equipment. Like, it's just totally basic. It's like a writer's paradise. It's absolutely perfect. No distractions, no TVs, nothing like that. Just a beautiful view. Every painting, every picture, everything that's in there has something to do with the boat here, there, everywhere. And it just smells nautical. And, oh, man, it was just a blast from the past. And it was like a year or two ago that I spoke here last time. And, yeah, it was just, I don't know. I've had some really wonderful landfalls in my life, but this is definitely up there in the top 5, I would think, for sure. There was something about it that just felt so great. And, yeah, happy to be here and looking forward to a few more days of not only sharing stories publicly and all that sort of stuff, but showing off the old Sparrow. And that's also a great prod to get the stainless polished up. Tomorrow is going to be my work day, trying to get everything all gussied up as best as I can. I mean, part of the reason I'm going to Maine, not only to see everybody, obviously, but and escape the wrath of the hurricane season, is the wood, the bright work. Oh my good gosh, it just got roasted down south. All those years, remember, we hauled out in late December 20. Wait. Was it 2023? No. 2022? No. It was 2023. We hauled down to TJ's. And basically, we've been south of the Mason-Dixon line ever since. And now we're finally north again. And that time down there, I mean, just all the varnish work that I did before completely got peeled up. And it just looks... It doesn't look terrible, but it just doesn't look great. It's not the way I like Sparrow to look. The bowsprit, when I think of how many coats of varnish and epoxy and all the stuff that I did to it when we pulled that thing down in Beaufort all those years ago, and what it looks like now, it's crazy. So that is the big main purpose. Get up there. Plus, I'm pulling all my chain plates because I got to inspect them. I got rusts coming out of... little streaks of rust, I should say, coming out of just about every single one of them at this point, and that needs to be inspected for sure. I'm pretty sure it has nothing to do with the actual chain plate itself. I think it's the bolts, and hey, I don't mind replacing the bolts and things like that, but I definitely want to pluck those. The question is, do I have to take the mast down for that? Am I patient enough to do chain plates one at a time? We have enough stays on this boat to be able to keep that mast up and remove one or two of them at a time. So we'll have to sort of see. But yeah, that's the big thing. Bright work and the chain plates. And I think then I'm going to feel pretty darn good about things going forward. Might replace the lower shrouds as well, because those are the last of the originals. But I'm going to hit up my old pal, friend of the show, Larique, and get his thoughts and see what he thinks is going to be best for that. So a lot of fun things to look forward to. And yeah, also just the last leg, crossing the Gulf of Maine one more time. I love it. It's going to be a blast. I'm going to wait for the perfect weather window. I'll tell you that much. We're not going to do the old motoring across the Gulf of Maine this time. We are going to thunder across in a beautiful 20 knot southwesterly. I mean, I looked at the forecast for just the coming week or so, and it's southwest, like steady up there. But I'm going to look for a nice. I want to do a record run sort of thing. The only trouble is going to be trying to get out of Nantucket Sound, but that shouldn't actually be all that hard. I think we'll be in pretty good shape for that. And yeah, that's sort of the game plan. But funny thing though, this morning I'm cooking. I'm making coffee, about ready to start cooking breakfast, and behind me I hear this like clunk, tick, tick. Didn't sound like something falling. It kind of did. Didn't sound like something popping. But then all of a sudden I am smelling. It smelled like electricity. Big fear of mine. Ooh, and it's definitely right to be afraid of that on a boat. The smell of electricity arcing or wires melting, that is like number one how boat fires start. And I'm kind of like, whoa. And I look back and I don't see anything on the floor. Nothing fell. But then all of a sudden I'm smelling that stuff. And here's the odd thing is it wasn't just like a normal, I'm smelling electrical stuff. Because that has a very distinct smell and almost a taste as well. But then added to that, it smelled very, very similar to when you mix up some West Systems epoxy. And I was like, oh no, has my West System can tipped over? And then I'm like, oh, that must have been what that noise is. So I go underneath the bunk and I'm like, nope, it's all sitting right where it is. It's not dumping out or anything like that. And then I am sitting here searching, going through everything with my nose, and I'm just trying to sniff this thing out, and I cannot find it. I'm in the engine room, all this sort of stuff. Oh my gosh. And nothing. Couldn't figure it out. And I've been here all morning. It's, that was like 2.5 hours ago. And I'm still smelling it, but it's not as strong, but I can't isolate it anywhere. And then what was I doing? I think I was just here sitting at the nav station and working on the computer. And then all of a sudden, prata, and I hear it again. And it is 100% my inverter. And the old inverter, which has been a tried and true little guy, tucked into my nav station underneath the shelf in one of the most difficult areas to work on it or install it. It's like you'd have to see it to believe it. I think it's given up the ghost. One of the wires that are coming off of like the battery bank going to it, that was a bit loose, so it was arcing there, and it had a couple of things plugged into it, and it was popping its little breaker or something. So I don't know. I can still smell it. I felt it, and the thing was heated up something fierce. So I'm going to err on the side of caution, and because it served so many faithful years and kept the lights on, so to speak, when I needed it, I think it's time to retire this old girl, because it's just one of those things where when it comes to electricity and all that, boy, oh boy, you don't want to pinch pennies, you don't want to do shortcuts, because like I said, I mean, that's number one as far as how fires start and all that. And I do have a spare here, and the problem is it's bigger, so I'm gonna have to find a different spot to mount this thing. And what I'm thinking is maybe this time I mount it, I don't know, in a more accessible area, because it's been such a headache. I literally have to lay half on the nav station, feet dangling somewhere, upside down, to be able to reach in to like just tighten the screws to install this thing. And sometimes it's great because it hides it and you can't see it, but at the same time, when anything goes wrong with it, then you're doing yoga poses just to get in there and actually try and fix the stupid thing. So I think sometimes aesthetics and functionality are just as important a balance as suffering and joy. So I don't know. Take that for what you will. But so I don't know. So, little update as far as the offshore recordings and stuff. I just need a little bit of time. We've got to talk this evening. There's going to be a pretty busy social aspect to being up here, I believe, because just great people and lots of fun and one of those things where I'm only here for a little bit of time. So, long story short, I just don't have a huge amount of time. But tomorrow, I'm going to dedicate a nice chunk of the day to go through and make sure all those recordings are good and figure out how I'm going to package and put together everything. But I'll just keep sort of pumping this stuff up and out as it comes. But my goal is to have all those podcasts out, and I if I put out like 4 or 5 podcasts day after day after day over this week, then that's how we're gonna roll with it, and we'll see. I just don't know exactly how many hours I have recorded, or if I even have hours. We'll have to. I don't know if they're just going to be a bunch of short ones. So I'm going to get to work on that tomorrow and start pumping those out. So I guess consider this one just a little story time, Cape Cod update. And so thank you, everybody, for continuing to listen. And thanks for all the support. Just check the details in the episode description, links for all the ways that you can help support not only the show, but adventures in Mighty Sparrow and all that entails. Really, really do appreciate everything. And until next time.